Today we only going to do 2.5 minutes for our prayer time. So move this over. I need the mouse. In back. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and get started with praying.
And for prayer, for everyone, we're gonna do a silent. We're gonna do a 2.5 minute prayer. If your spouse is not here, you're praying over your marriage and over your spouse. If your spouse is here, then you will pray aloud with your spouse. And you pray over your spouse out loud.
That deals with how you show respect to your husbands. Last week we ended on authority and spent a good amount of time there, just because it's such a important topic. Not to say that the rest of them are not, but just really wanted to spend some time to clarify any misnomers that people can have when it comes to authority. And so this week we're going to attempt to get through the rest of the chair's acronym just to keep ourselves on track. And that goes with insight, relationship, and sexuality. All right, so moving on into the insight acronym, which as the author characterizes it, is to appreciate his desire to analyze and counsel.
Sure. Okay, so while last week we were talking about authority and whether or not men have authority in their houses, in their households, this actually, it's insight goes along with it, right? And the reason why insight goes along with it is because a lot of times women resist the authority of their husbands because they don't trust in his insight. They don't trust in his ability to make decisions, right? So a lot of times, so what happens when a man does not respect, when a woman does not respect her husband, even though he's a good man, because he's not the man she wants, right? And so what that means is, I'm going to give an example. When me and my husband were first married, there were a lot of things that I looked at him with contempt about. Like, I was annoyed by him because he was not my daddy. And it's, when I say he wasn't my daddy, I mean, he was not the man that my daddy was. And so I looked for my husband to be the same man that my daddy was. And when he didn't do things that my daddy did, or if he didn't lead the way my daddy was, I was annoyed. The thing is, a lot of times you can be faced with a man who is already a good man. If you ever hear yourself say, he's a good man, he's just not a good man for me, then this is a situation where you have to see, you want to look at him and take him for who he is and understand him for who he is, right? Because otherwise, if you are in that space, you can have contempt for your husband, even though he's a good person, right? So many men are discouraged by their wife's contempt. And contempt is just like, you just can't stand him. He's annoying, you can't stand him, you're looking at him like, in your heart, right? And so when a man is faced with that kind of contentment, he may become afraid or discouraged, rather, to do or say something wrong. And when that discouragement is ever present, a lot of times a man will shut down, okay? And in these cases, it's because women tend to think they have a better idea than their husband, like all the time. Like, my idea, my way, my thoughts are better. This is just, let me tell you, men, just be patient with that, because that's been going on since God put a woman on the earth. Think about the fact that Adam was in that garden for a long time. This was not a situation where it's like he was there for a little while and then all of a sudden God was like, let me put a woman in there. He was there he was there long enough to name all the animals. Okay. He was there to know what this earth was, and he was alone, and he felt alone, and he felt incompatible with anything else. That's why God said it was good for man not to be alone. He went ahead and gave him a woman. But when she came in, all of a sudden she had a good idea already. Oh, guess what? Let's go check out this tree. He already knew you weren't supposed to do it. So a lot of times women think they have a better idea than their husband, but that's not necessarily the case. I want you to ask yourself and think, women, sisters, wives, when was the last time you tried to learn something from your husband? The thing about it is, like, when was the last time you gleaned from his wisdom? Or do you even believe that your husband does not have good enough ideas to consider his ideas? And a lot of times that's what it is. Even when I was reading that, it made me laugh. I'm like, his idea? I never even thought about it if he had an idea, and it just made me laugh, because I'm like, it's such a valid point that when it comes to raising children, when it comes to bills, when it comes to making major decisions, buying a car, deciding where to live, a lot of times women are like, listen, it's my idea and I want to stick to it. Okay. Any thoughts on that? I put a little note in here, just a little funny note. The first time a woman led a man in the world, the world fell into sin. We really don't need to be in a position of leading our husbands. The world fell into sin the first time that happened. And even though Eve was a blessing for Adam, for sure, this newfound pleasure in this woman could have clouded his mind. And we as wives have to be careful not to cloud the minds of our husbands, especially when they're being led by God.
Yeah. And I really want to kind of highlight that last point there about being open to your husband's corrective criticism and not being so quick to be defensive. As it's stated right here, a marriage needs both. We, absolutely need, our wives' intuition, because you all have that. That's something that God blessed you with. That's something that men just don't really have, in terms of like, okay, how they're looking at a situation or a major decision or anything like that. But on the other side of that, you also need your husband's insight. There's just a certain way that we think, the majority of men, where it's very analytical, it's very objective based, it's very, kind of taking into all of these different factors before jumping into a decision. And you need both of them in order to make the best decision possible. I think God built us that way intentionally, so that the best of both of us could move us forward. And so what do you do if your husband is not leading your family spiritually? Any thoughts on that?
That's a deep question, because a lot of times women, just statistically, tend to fill the pews at church. Okay. Anytime you look around in any congregation, there are a lot more women than men. But what do you do if your husband is not leading your family spiritually and you feel convicted that he should be, because the Bible says this is the order, right? So.
And husbands, similarly to that, you really have to be considering, if I'm trying to offer my insight or a comment to better you, if you haven't really been in tune with the Spirit, if you haven't really been praying, if you really haven't, been fostering your relationship with God, are you really in the position to be able to say, hey, you need to X, Y, and Z? And on the other side of that, like, how would that be received? Is there, again, we talked about this last week with authority, and it applies here, how much trust have you really built up in order to say, or offer your insight? Because that's really important, right? You know, if it's all like, hey, you haven't really been doing anything spiritual at all, you know, visibly that I can see, you know, why would I take advice from you? Why would I, you know, you understand what I'm saying? It would be hard to receive that at that point. So just another thing to keep in mind.
So the book suggests that when that happens, wives should still have a humble spirit and not judge your husband's imperfections. And even if those imperfections are spiritual convictions for you, but instead spend time praying for him and building him up through encouragement, to be the leader that you want him to be. There are going to be times when your husband is not leading the family spiritually, so that may fall into your what am I trying to
Your
say?
responsibility,
Okay.
or like something that you need to do.
Right.
Because, you know, sometimes, you know, we fall, you know, one of us is down and the other one is up. And that one who is up should graciously take up the mantle of being all like, let me pray for my spouse. Let me encourage my spouse. Let me, you know, get them out of this space that they're in, or at least be there alongside of them while they're there, you know, and not necessarily hold them in contempt and be all like, when are you going to be done with this? Like, what's up? What, you know, you're supposed to be doing these things, but you're not, right? So
The thing is, sisters, we have to be careful that when we see that our husbands are not leading spiritually, or when we start believing that our ideas are better than our husband's ideas, to not fall into the sin of self-righteousness. And self-righteousness is indeed a sin. You may have the idea and the attitude that like, hey, my husband, he just can't do nothing. He's not smart enough. He's not grounded enough to make decisions. And then we also think that, you know, women constantly have to be on top of things, correcting the kids, correcting the husbands, and doing all of these extra things, you know, in the household. And then through that, we end up developing this attitude of self-righteousness without even realizing it. You end up trying to take the place of your husband's Holy Spirit. Okay? What if you looked at your husband's criticism as trying to help you instead of being critical and uncaring? See, but when we develop an attitude of self-righteousness, we can't even hear our husband's criticisms because we're like, who are you to tell me? Look at you. You can't X, Y, Z. You don't X, Y, Z. How are you going to give me constructive criticism? And this is the trap that we fall into. And so we're a lot of times women are ready to shut our husbands down because of that. So sisters, I want to charge us all to change our mindset around our husband and what they're capable of, and what they're capable of bringing to the table.
any thoughts on that? Oh. So this is just some things that were brought up in the book. For women who aren't happy with their husband's leadership, here's some questions to ask yourself. Did my husband ever seek to lead in our marriage, but I differed because I felt it was stupid?
Let that sink.
Do I send him a message that I do not intend to follow him if he makes a decision contrary to what I believe is correct? Do I send a message that says, I want you to lead, but only when it bolsters and carries out my desires? Do I want my husband to be responsible, but if he is irresponsible, in my opinion, am I exercising veto power? Do my words and actions communicate, you are responsible, but I have the authority? Some pretty deep questions.
Anybody? Y'all so quiet today. It's okay. All right. So if you read across those questions, and that's on page 232, if you come across those questions, or if you felt like you answered yes to those questions, then it would be important to check yourself.
Ooh, very pretty mic. Well, it made me remember there was a time where
some reason, I became super indecisive. Like, it was ridiculous. I couldn't make up a decision to save my life because things were like almost like a domino effect, just falling apart. And I remember we had to discuss that because spiritually, I wasn't praying, wasn't reading, any of those things. And I remember what Danielle did, because for her, that's like, what are we going to do if you can't make a decision, you know? And I remember the conversation we had that really helped was, just give me room to make a mistake. Because the problem with being inside is like I was so scared of getting things wrong that it was like, okay, let's trust God that even if we make a mistake, He could help us with it. And so for us with what we're referring, that really helped in that she didn't necessarily like, okay, you can't be a good leader, I'll be the leader. Then it wasn't that. It was, let's make some space so that as we get past wherever we are, we're going to make some mistakes, we're going to get some stuff wrong. But let's pour enough grace into this relationship that I don't judge the marriage based on where you are in the season. And that helped us out so much.
It's a great scenario there. Sometimes we just need that space to fail, and learn from those mistakes and stuff like that. And so I appreciate you sharing that example. I think when I looked at insight, it really kind of came more to my mindset of, and we already kind of covered this a little bit, it's not that a bad decision or the insight that is being brought forth is wrong necessarily. It's just not exactly the way you would think it should be done, right? And so, we learn in a lot of different ways where, there's more than one way to get to the solution of a problem, and so the style points, again, they're great to have, but they're not the end all be all. It's like at the end of the day, are we getting to the conclusion that we really want to get to? So that's just one of those things to just keep in mind, as we, again, try to show respect by appreciating our husband's insight. Any other comments before we move on? All right. So the next one that we're going to talk about is relationship. And this is speaking specifically to appreciating his desire for shoulder-to-shoulder friendship. So what is shoulder-to-shoulder friendship? The author, he really went into depth and showed several examples of, this is really more so when, husbands, they want their wives to be around. They really do. They appreciate that camaraderie when we're together, sitting shoulder to shoulder, engaging in activity. But the caveat here is, it doesn't necessarily have to lead to a discussion or, some kind of deep conversation or anything like that. And one of the things that I really appreciated the author, doing was giving the perspective of like, a husband may say, hey, baby girl, why don't you come on over here and just have a seat with me while we're just sitting here looking at the game? And in her mind, she's all like, I have 1,000,001 things to do right now. I don't have time to be just sitting here. There's, the kids need stuff. We need to get ready for the week, X, Y, and Z and stuff like that. But what even understanding all of that other stuff that's going on, what he really wants is for you all to just be able to just sit there without an agenda, without, having to move on to the next thing, even if it's just for a little while. And so that's really what we're talking about when we talk about relationship.
It's my turn. Okay, so sometimes sisters, and again, we're in the energizing cycle. So if you're in the crazy cycle, this may not be the case, but once you start, these are ways that you can start getting out of the crazy cycle, right? Your husband can be energized by your presence, just by seeing you. And he doesn't necessarily need to talk. And so if your husband does invite you into his space, sometimes he's just inviting you in for shoulder to shoulder interaction, because men tend to, did we already say that? Men tend to share experiences and activities as opposed to words. Even when you're looking at little boys playing, you don't see them sitting around talking in a circle. They're usually actually playing. They're kicking a ball or they're playing basketball or they're doing something like that. And then they walk away with their hands on each other's shoulders. Like, that was successful. We had a good time. Whereas the little girls are face to face. They're talking in a circle. They're doing hand games, things that they're face to face with. And so as wives, we kind of have to be perceptive of that our husbands were those little boys at one point in time, and they don't want to play patty cake necessarily. They don't want to be sitting here talking to us face to face all the time. We cannot treat our husbands like they are filled with feminine energy, because they're not, and we really don't want them to be. So that's not to say that husbands, you are off the hook for communicating to your wives. We still need that. But as a piece of reciprocation, we should be able to spend time in our husband's spaces, doing the things that our husbands like to do, without being critical of his hobbies, without talking down about his hobbies, without calling his hobbies childish.
Or boring, or complaining while you're doing it. It's hot out here, it's cold out here, or, this is just a waste of time. One of the things I remember, and this is just how powerful this is, and I never even realized it, but some of my more memorable memories, especially when me and Nee was early married, she would just be sitting there doing her hair, either taking it out or putting it in or something like that. I'm just playing.
Wow, taking my hair
No,
out.
I'm just playing. Like, just she'll be doing, yeah. She'll be,
We all understand.
yeah, she'll be doing her hair, and I'll be playing the game, and we would just be up to like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and it was just such a great time. And I shared this before. One of the best times that I've had was, one time that she actually picked up the controller, and we played through an entire game together, like from beginning to the end. She got the mechanics down. And I mean, we were like, telling each other what direction to go into, and we, completed the whole game in a whole entire one session. And so it's a very powerful thing, and that definitely made me feel respected, that she respects me in the things that I like to do, and even now, she'll sit down and, I'll play through a game while she's watching, doing other things, but she'll be there shoulder to shoulder. So just find some kind of way that you can incorporate that. It isn't a waste of time. It's actually, building something in your husband. And that's what we really want, So
When you spend time shoulder to shoulder with your husband, it shows that you are appreciating something that's close to his heart without being judgmental. We don't necessarily have a clear understanding as to why this thing is important to him, but appreciating those things about him will draw him close to you. He'll be like, oh, she sees me. I have to thank my brother for that, because I used to watch my brother play video games and I'd be like, oh, get him. But me picking that controller up, it just gives me anxiety when I'm about to die. But it's important for us women not to be judgmental of the things we don't understand about our husbands, but be supportive. And what I wanted to do, hold on one second. Oh, let me read this real quick and then we'll do our turn and talk. Does your husband feel like you like him? Is one of the questions that I wanted to really bring up, because this shoulder to shoulder relationship aspect really deals with whether or not your husband feels like you like him, not just because we spend time shoulder to shoulder, but because you're like looking at him like, here you go again with this thing that you do that I don't understand, but you're just annoying. You're just an annoying being, right? When it comes to relationships, men do feel respected when you like them. Your husband knows you love him, but it's different to be liked and you're not constantly annoyed or feeling contempt for him, such as rolling your eyes or interrupting him because what he's got to say is not important anyway, judging, correcting, fixing, nagging, and showing him that you don't like him just as he is. Okay, so this is why it could be helpful for you to come into their space and just sit in silence and just be with him. Imagine that. I think about, what noise do I bring into his quiet space? I always think about that. I'm like, when I'm coming into his space, am I doing something that he likes or doesn't like, right? I'm always thinking that I want to treat my husband in a way that when I'm gone, he misses me. It's like, I can't wait till she gets back home. I want him to feel like that all the time. Like, I want it to be that if I have to pass on and he have to find another wife, that he can't stand his other wife because I was just that good. Think about that. And he's always going to be thinking about me so if we changed our mindset to say, oh, I really want to treat my husband in a way that he misses me when he's gone. He's going out of town. He wants to run back home. Think about how that will change your relationship. Okay.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And that's definitely, you do an extremely great job of that, because I do miss you whenever we're away and stuff like that.
I know that.
And I always appreciate, like we're talking about here, that time where we're just together, and it's something that I would like to do. I know that it's a sacrifice, and so I'm gonna just read this scenario. Then we're gonna see if y'all have any comments. So from the book, he gave this story. Another wife, despite her reservations about.
Hold on a second. This one.
Okay. One wife decided to go deer hunting with her husband, who uses a bow and arrow. She helped him set up the blind. They both sat there for hours waiting for a deer to happen by. They saw nothing, they shot at nothing, and they said nothing. Finally, they took down the blind and headed back to the car. To this point, she had not said one word the entire time. As they were walking down the trail, her husband turned to her and said, "This was awesome." So it may not make sense, it may feel unnatural, but it really, again, it builds something up in your husband for you to engage in the activity that he likes.
And this is not to say you are sitting in a silent relationship. That's abuse. For a woman, if you were sitting in a silent relationship and your husband never talked to you, you could not imagine how withering that is for a woman. How it can slowly kill us. But what we're saying is we are willing to be silent in your spaces. But don't leave us out there to dry, not talking to us, not speaking to us, not telling us we're pretty, or don't kill us. Don't slowly kill us, okay?
And I think, just to make this clear distinction, when the author is saying, not talking, it isn't necessarily, silence in that kind of way. It's more so like, this isn't the time to have a serious conversation. It's all like, if we're sitting there looking at the game, it's all like, what, last week, this really bothered me. And it's like, whoa, wait a minute. I thought we was just hanging out right now. Like we've said in other classes, timing is everything. There is a time to bring up things, and there's a time not to bring up things. So make sure that your attention is there. So we're going to do a quick little activity here, turn and talk. So husbands, tell your wives one activity that would be cool for you both to do together, shoulder to shoulder. Y'all just take
no talking, shoulder. Wives, you just sitting here being still. Husbands, think about it. That means you're gonna have to talk. God bless. Tell your wives one activity you would think would be cool if y'all did together, shoulder to shoulder. We'll give y'all some time.
Cool. We might do a whole lot of good stuff. We go to the gym. We sit there and play the game.
Okay. All right. Wives, did you get that? Okay, let's go. I want to know. I'm curious. I want to know what this new thing that you'll be doing with your husband too.
Well, that's not what I was going to
Okay,
ask.
go ahead.
Oh, I can answer that. What was the question again?
If it's
Oh, what if it's the opposite? For instance, I'm not a talker. But Fred is the talker. And so when I think we're supposed to be doing nothing, he wants to talk as a way to bond.
Okay.
And so in my situation, I don't like to talk or have deep conversations. And so in that situation, I would have to come out of that comfort zone to do that. Oh, and his thing, what he wants to do, a cool activity is talk. I love it. I'm gonna move the mic. I love that.
I think you just answered
That's
it
okay.
though. Yeah, I mean, because it's like you said, this is something that you would have to kind of come out of your comfort zone to do. So it's all like, I'm not really big on words or, having long conversations, but I mean, this is an activity that, he really wants to do. You got to think in terms of like, it's not for me right now. This is more so for my spouse. So,
I would say too, the things that we talk about, this is not like necessarily a man and woman thing. Like, this is one of the things me and BJ dealt with as well, is like, well, this is saying this is for men, and this is saying for this is women, but I relate more. That's okay. Still, it's still the same thing. You then find space to have these conversations. Say, hey, babe, let's sit down and talk about that important thing that we need to talk about. And then you be ready to accept the things that he says with an open heart. And you be ready to have those conversations with her without a excessively critical spirit. And y'all can get through your conversation.
It's not necessarily like something specific that we want to talk about. It really just draws me closer to her, like knowing her, like any little details, your childhood. What did you like doing? Did you dance? Like I want to know detail that draws me closer.
That's
so
cool.
That's my type of bonding.
I love that. That's cool.
All right, what does your husband want to do?
He wants to go to the park and throw the football.
There we go.
We used to do that in Chicago when we were engaged.
Mm-hmm.
We hadn't done that in a long time.
Something simple.
That's easy. All right, so y'all gonna be at the park throwing a football. Y'all got a football? Okay, we gonna do that this week.
Do you know something you really want to do? No.
All right, what does your husband want to do?
Shoot the basketball around in the driveway.
Okay. All right, there we go. You got two tall people. You got a basketball. We're gonna get some stuff done. Okay, what does your husband want to do?
He wants us to, my husband likes, as a way to decompress and therapy, like fix cars, restore cars. So he wants us to work on a car together.
All right, let's go work on the car together. All you got to do is pass the wrench. Sit down out there, chew your gum. Don't pass the wrench.
She's gonna have to do more than that.
Oh, you're going to have to put your hands in there. Okay, great. So we all have some things that we could do with our husbands to do shoulder to shoulder time. Oh, mine. Well, what we'll probably end up doing is, oh gosh, I'm gonna have to pick up the controller. It just gives me anxiety. I'm not gonna just be able to sit there and watch them play. I'm gonna have to pick up the controller. Okay, let me read this real quick. Your husband will feel you have his shoulder to shoulder friendship. You value his shoulder to shoulder friendship when you tell him you like him and you show it. You respond to his invitation to engage in recreational activities together, or you come along and just watch him. You enable him to open up and talk to you as you're doing shoulder to shoulder. You enable him to open up and talk to you as you do shoulder to shoulder activities. You encourage him to spend time alone, which energizes him to reconnect with you later. And you don't denounce his shoulder to shoulder activities with his male friends to get him to spend more face-to-face time with you. Respect his friendships, and he will more than likely want to join you in shoulder to shoulder times. Okay, now we want to get to the fun stuff. Yeah.
All right, so the last of the chair's acronym is sexuality, which is to appreciate his desire for sexual intimacy. So, obviously, sex is a very sensitive topic, with a lot of different layers. And I just want to kind of throw this precursor out, just similar to our discussion with authority and a lot of these other things. Husbands, you really have to exercise good, godly, mature judgment in this space. You know when it is a good time and you know when it is not a good time. And so you have to be the one who is cognizant of that. It's like, is my wife really in the mind space for this right now, or not? And if she's not, then you don't want to push this too hard. Just wanted to start off with that. Make sure that you are always aware of what's going on. So moving into the content of the chapter, we all have heard the term that, wives can use sex as a weapon. And I know that sounds, rather sharp, right? But, kind of using it as a way to persuade or influence or punish your husband for, whatever it is that they are doing or not doing. And that is not the design. That's not what God made sex for. And so we really wanted to make sure that we highlight that and stress the importance of, if you are carrying a posture about sex to be all like, well, I'm going to withhold it until you do the things that I really want you to do, or that's just wrong, and it can really build up a sense of resentment inside of your husbands, right? So.
No, I was just going to say that reminds me of this situation I encountered one time in a hallway at church. I had a friend and she had recently gotten married, and I gave her a piece of lingerie. And I always give my friends lingerie when they get married. And I said, I was joking around. I feel bad that I did that now. And I said, girl, with her husband, I said, did you put that piece of lingerie on for your husband? And he was like, lingerie? I ain't seen no lingerie. She said, no, you ain't seen no lingerie, because you haven't did this, did that, did this, and did that. And I was like, oops, should have asked. But, sex is not a reward, okay? Just as much as it's not a punishment. And we can't use sex. Sex is a resource and a tool that we have in our marriage for connection. And I will say, again, just like Teresa said in the last one, shoulder to shoulder, that, she relates one way or another. This is the same thing. Like, just because this is in the man's portion doesn't mean that this is specific for men, because it really just depends on everybody and who everyone is. So, just as wives should not use sex as punishment or reward, nor should husbands. I'm just going to put that out there. But we need to make sure that we speak to our husbands' natural and innate desire for sexual intimacy. Oh, this is such a hard conversation sometimes, because it's hard to give your body sexually when you don't feel a connection with your husband. Like, you haven't been talking to me, you have not been, we haven't connected at all, but I'm supposed to go ahead and lay down and give sex. Like, that is a really hard space, right? But sometimes it is necessary, especially when you are in a place, when you're on the crazy cycle, and it's like, listen, something's got to give, right? Really, in all of these acronyms, as far as the men are concerned, something's got to give at some point in time, meaning that you don't ever want to put your husband in a position where he is, this is where we came up with this term in our early marriage when we did this, where he's wide open and susceptible to temptation. Because we know that this is a need for our husbands. If he is being, if you're withholding from him and he's unable to get this sexual satisfaction, then it does leave him open for other people to swoop in and be all like, hey, what you doing? And you just don't want your husband to be in that position.
Yeah, the author really went through that a whole lot. And, there's more to be said about it, but, just kind of going back to like just the basics of it. So, men and women are wired differently. We all know that. Men are very visual, right? Very visual, whereas women are more so on the affectionate side. And, it's various degrees in everybody's different marriages and stuff like that. And that's something to be very, to make sure that you truly understand, as you are appealing to his sexual desires, that there's just a different way that we are constructed. And so let me see, I was kind of what Nelja was saying here, when you leave your husband wide open, you really put him into a position, or your wife for that matter too, you put them into a position where, it's very easy for somebody else to be able to make eyes or make that connection. And it may be something very insignificant that ends up being that gateway. Also, on the other end of that, we're all in our, mid 30s to, and older. We all grew up in the internet age. And so, studies have shown that there's a large sect of the internet that is dedicated to pornography, right? And with that, that's a gateway into, other behaviors and all these other kinds of things. And so, wives, just remember, when it comes to, sexuality and stuff like that, that this is a way that you can minister onto your husbands, right? I'm gonna be just being vulnerable here. I always have felt like, Nia's done a great job with this, where, she can see like, okay, picking up the different cues, he's not in a good headspace, or, today must have been rough, or whatever it may be, she really makes sure that she's in tune with that. And it's important that, again, as we're talking about love and respect, that this component is not just pushed off to the side. And, again, like I said, in this precursor, husbands, you also need to be very much so in tune with your wife. If you haven't been drawn close to her, if you haven't been really open with her, you haven't been understanding, the rest of the couple acronym, you really should take a step back and say, is this the right time for me to initiate this activity, right? Have I really built a connection with her? And so it kind of cuts both ways, but yeah.
I like this note that BJ put in here, and I'm going to read it. The husband's need for sexual release cannot be overstated. And society knows this, right? Which is why there is a significant amount of internet porn available at people's fingertips, right? And it can be free, where you just see people doing stuff on Instagram. I ran across a crazy thing one day, but it could be free, but it also can be paid for, because I saw the statistic yesterday, and it was $16 billion. I believe it was $16 billion is made through internet porn in America, and that's a lot of money. That's more than what's made in the NFL and Netflix. And those are some pretty rich companies, right? So that means that this is a real thing that people deal with, people outside of church and people inside of in church alike. And we do want to be able to help our husbands, if possible, because that can be a stronghold over our husbands, and Satan will definitely use it to push his mind somewhere else. And when that happens, he won't be able to pray right. He won't be able to make decisions. Everything will be compromised, because now Satan has a stronghold over him. And I'm not saying if that happens, just like, okay, I got it, sex to the rescue. There's definitely a level of prayer that needs to happen, and conversation, and a lot of different things. But we just have to make sure that we're supporting our husbands in that area.
Yeah. Last thing before we wrap up here, is kind of going to that last point with, be open to him sharing his temptations without shaming him, you know, like I said, it's already an uncomfortable enough topic, but you know, as the closest person on earth that you have, that he has, it's important to just allow him to, you know, express, you know, these different things that he may be thinking or feeling, or, you know, it could just be a general conversation without making him feel shamed by it. And you really have to be careful with this, you know, because it can be, you know, it's an opportunity, and it's like one of those things where the door is open, and if you don't do it correctly, that door can end up being closed forever. So, you know, if he's opening up and telling you, hey, you know, this is a temptation that I have, or, you know, a thought that I have that relates to sex, and you kind of recoil to it like, ooh, you know, that's very, you know, whatever. You know, you should expect that he will never open back up to you again with that. And, you know, none of us should want our spouses to be closed off. Like I said, this is the closest person that you will ever be to. You all are the closest to each other that anybody else would ever be to you. And so, just, you know, just want to say, just be careful with that. And it goes both ways, men and women, you know, to make sure that you don't demonstrate like that's shameful kind of behavior. Yeah. And so, yeah, any thoughts on that?
Oh, y'all real quiet with sex. Everybody say sex. No, I'm just playing.
Y'all real quiet. Okay, so we do have a piece of homework today, and wait. Let me read the sexuality part really quick. And they have just only a few short points. He will feel you appreciate his desire for sexual intimacy when you respond to him sexually more often and initiate sex periodically. You understand his needs. You understand he needs sexual release just as you need emotional release. You let him acknowledge his sexual temptations without feeling he'll be unfaithful and without shaming him. And you don't try to make him open up to you verbally by depriving him of sex.
Now, I just want to end with this one scripture that was referenced. It's from 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 5, which says, "Do not deprive each other except by mutual consent for a time, so that you may devote yourselves to prayer. Then come together again so that Satan will not tempt you because of your lack of self-control." You know, this is an actual biblical precept, you know? And so, you know, make sure that you read the whole thing, because what he's saying is, you know, there may come points in time where sex needs to be paused for whatever reason, you know, and that's something that you all have to talk about. But also, you are not to deprive each other intentionally. And so I think that is, did you?
Yeah, and for the homework, okay, so what I actually would like men to write an entry in the notebooks describing to your wife, as best as you possibly can, describe how would you like to be respected. I'm gonna remove off the regarding authority and insight. We have several acronyms. We've got conquest, hierarchy, authority, insight, relationship, and sexuality. And instead of trying to do all of the things at one time, give in the notebook one thing that your wife can do immediately to show you respect. Because I think half of the issue is that we don't really communicate what it is that we need. So give one example of what your wife can do immediately to show you respect in one of those areas. And wives, I want you to respond to their entry in a loving way, in a way that you're moving towards him in this, and showing that you want to make an effort to do that. And also, we all have a task to go and do something shoulder to shoulder with our husbands this week. Okay? All right. Now, as far as the prayer is concerned, 4, 6, 8, we have 8, 9 people, 10, 11. What we're going to do is I want you to pair up with another couple, and I'm going to actually give you a couple to pair up with, and we want you to pray with that couple. Okay, so Teresa, Fred, Thad, and Ariel, if you all can pair up, and Keith, Erica, Janice, and the Josephs, if y'all can pair up, and we'll pair up with Zahn and Sade. We're gonna pair up and we're gonna do a quick prayer, and we're gonna do the same thing next week.